I've been working on another video for another brand of GMT watch for a long time, and when this GMT came out from Seiko, it just disrupted what I'm working on. And that's why this is actually officially, I'm going to call it the second episode, even though I still haven't posted the first episode of my YouTube channel, In Search of the Perfect Watch, onto YouTube yet. I hope you enjoy the presentation. How can this be the second episode? Well, I've been working on the first episode for approximately a month, if not longer, and then Seiko did something horrible to me. After I bought a new GMT watch from another company, you'll have to watch that video to find out about that watch. The next day, after that watch arrived, UPS, Seiko announced that they're selling a Seiko 5 GMT. I fell to the floor and cried. I was in the fetal position for hours. Why? Well, first of all, I love Seiko watches.
My precious, oh my precious, we must have it.
Second, it was a mechanical GMT that I could afford. Oh, these kids today, you're not going to believe it. Michael, who's behind the camera, didn't know who Cecil B. DeMille was when I was making jokes at his expense. All right, anyways, so here's the deal. I went in person to Valia's watch shop in Pasadena. Valia's watch shop is on Foothill Boulevard in Pasadena. They were very nice. They were very friendly. They let me look at the watches for a long time. I haven't bought one yet, but I know how my brain works. I'm going to roll around in bed at night for the next month or two, and I'm going to find myself going there at 6 in the morning and waiting until they open at 10 in the morning so I can buy the watch.
Okay, here's the thing. Look at this photograph of the watch on my wrist in their shop in Pasadena. In real life, this watch looks even better than it does on any website, period. The watch actually looks really nice. Everything about the watch's construction is really nice. The one thing that really pleased me, and this is something I complained about in the first episode, which has not been posted on YouTube yet, which is that I really hate the way watches are sold with a bracelet or a strap that is too short. The watch just looks better than it does on anybody else's website, period. Here's the thing. The bracelet itself felt lightweight, but I took a good look at it and it is not a cheap construction. The Jubilee bracelet is made out of good, solid parts, and they made it nice and long so that a gigantic guy like me can actually put it on his wrist and walk out of the store wearing it without cutting off the blood supply to my hand. Which is another nice thing about a Seiko GMT versus, we won't say their name out loud, but those guys, you want a GMT from them? Sure. Maybe buy a Ferrari and give it to the owner of the jewelry store? Let's talk about the movement. The movement is Seiko's Caliber 4R34. I suspect that somehow they figured out a way of taking the day of the week function and converting that into the GMT hand. Those of you out there who are professional watchmakers are invited to chime in with your opinions on this. Regardless, here's my concern. The jumping 24-hour hand on this watch concerns me. Why? Well, because I like a 24-hour hand that rotates smoothly around the dial. At first, they are harder to set to the correct time, but afterwards, you don't get the mechanical problems that you get with watches like my Glycine Airman, where the 24-hour hand gets stuck between two time zones, and you wiggle the crown and you try to fix it and you can't, and you lose your mind because now your watch looks really stupid. My hope is that there's enough of a difference between the Seiko 4R34 caliber and the 2893 type of calibers for Swiss-made GMT watches that perhaps this will not be an issue. I am truly hoping that Seiko got the mechanical design right and that the 24-hour GMT hand will not get stuck between two time zones when you're trying to reset the 24-hour hand. If this watch does that, I'm going to scream and jump off the roof. I already have a Swiss watch that's doing that. And I'm going to have to turn it into a watchmaker. I'm going to have to find the paperwork, see if that glycine is still under warranty. If it's not, I'm going to have to pay out of pocket for something that's really an aesthetically displeasing problem. It's not a real life problem, because what I do right now is I have the 24-hour bezel slightly off kilter so that the GMT hand matches up correctly with the 24 hours in the real world. But it's just really stupid and embarrassing for a Swiss watch to be like that. When I was in their store, they had already sold out the copies of the watch, the 001 with the black dial. I actually like the blue dial. I don't know which one I'm going to get. Surprisingly, the one that I'm not going to get, even though I'm a big fan of orange watches, owner of both a Doxa and a Seiko Orange Monster, I thought I was going to get the orange dialed version because I figured that that funky looking version will turn into our generation's version of the Pogue and become a collector's item that people really want 20 or 30 years from now, if I'm still alive at that point. Surprisingly, in the store, I spent a lot of time looking at the orange dial watch, and I discovered that it's really hard to separate the GMT hand from the other two hands. It was really hard to tell where the GMT hand was and what hour it was pointing at. The other reason is that for some reason they decided to make the numbers on the 24-hour rotating bezel orange. Why? Well, it probably is trying to be aesthetically pleasing, part of a color scheme, but in real life, it actually makes it a little bit more difficult to read the 24-hour time for the other time zone that you're keeping track of. A real world need that I have. I have family in Eastern Europe, 9 hours time zone difference. So I want to be able to look at that watch without my reading glasses on and quickly determine what time it is in Budapest. I can't do that very well with the orange dialed watch, much to my disappointment. I was really looking forward to buying and owning that one. One argument for and against getting the black dialed SKS001 is that it bears too much resemblance to a Rolex GMT Master, especially with the Cyclops. A couple of points to ponder. Number one, the patent, the copyright on the Cyclops expired decades ago, and a lot of different companies have a Cyclops. I have a Glycine Airman that has a Cyclops on it. Truth be told, at first I objected to it because I thought it looks too Rolex-y, but on the other hand, with my eyes at my age, that's really handy. I can read the date easily. I'm just surprised that Seiko did this because on my other Seikos, they have the date or the day of the week, both, and a large enough font where I can read them without my reading glasses under a lot of circumstances. So I don't know why they went with the Cyclops. One last comment about the dial and legibility. Unfortunately, somehow Seiko has figured out a way to make its dive watches, and now this GMT watch, to where there is a beautiful narrow metal rim around each of the hour markers on the watch. And guess what? They don't actually reflect or glint fading sunlight at dusk or dawn. They're there, but they don't have the function of actually reflecting light the way it does on Rolex and Omega watches of the same types. Same thing goes for the hour and the minute hand, the second hand, and even the GMT hand on the orange dialed watch. They're not reflecting sunlight at funny angles, so you're not getting that added boost of being able to read the time at dusk or dawn, or a dimly lit area where it's not dark enough for you to see the lume, but it's not bright enough to see the watch well. The Swiss watches get this right on some of the higher end models. I think more people in Japan and Switzerland could do a better job of making hands and hour markers that would reflect the light better. I shouldn't have to go out and buy a Grand Seiko to get this. Or an Omega. You noticed at the beginning of the video that I was wearing my original first generation Seiko Orange Monster, right? Well, here's the thing about that watch. I actually like the bracelet that the watch came with, but the reason I don't wear the watch on its original metal bracelet is that the case back of that watch eventually causes my skin on my wrist to get a rash. Breweries where they make beer have to have perfectly smooth surfaces on the interior of the stainless steel pipes to keep any kind of particles and bacteria from accumulating on them. If that does happen, it will ruin the beer. This is the same exact thing that's happening on the back of my watch while I'm wearing it. This is why, except for my Omega Planet Ocean, most of my watches I wear not on a bracelet, but with a NATO strap. The other reason, and I can't believe I'm going to say something nice about Rolex. Some of you out there know that I owned a Rolex GMT Master for 15 years, and I got rid of it in a fit of rage. That's a separate story, another broadcast episode. Here's the thing. Rolex uses a specific recipe for their stainless steel where I don't wind up getting a rash from having the steel of the watch in constant contact with my skin, especially during hot, sweaty weather. The other watch that I have where I can get away with doing that is my Omega Planet Ocean. In plain English, I love everything about Seiko watches, but there's some ingredient in their stainless steel, probably has a little bit too much of a nickel content in the alloy that they use that causes my skin to break out. One other thing I almost forgot to mention, probably the most important thing. I don't know if the Seiko 5 type of dive watches have a click on the rotating bezel or not, but I was very pleased to discover that the rotating bezel with the 24-hour numbers on it is not a clicking bezel. Thank God they did that right. It's smooth, no clicking. You just rotate it either direction. That's the way it should be for any GMT watch. It's one of a couple of things that I don't like about what Omega did when they had their Planet Ocean GMT. We'll talk about that one day. So, should you buy this watch or not? Yeah, go ahead and buy it. I like everything about it. It's just better looking in real life than it is on the internet. The bracelet is better than you think in real life. The see-through case back, aesthetically pleasing, but also for me helps avoid skin rashes. So when I buy it in the next couple months, I'm going to wear it on the original bracelet. And even though I have gigantic wrists, I won't have to have somebody add links to it. I'll be able to wear it straight out of the box and just adjust it myself. Bravo, Seiko. Bravo.